there are some fundamental questions now that will have to be answered in the White House and speak to significant divisions between Donald Trump's advisors as to whether the answer to the Houthi thing is to put pressure on the jugular, as it were, and to attack Iran and hold them accountable. But if you do that, then presumably the whole attempt to get back into the business of restricting their nuclear program will either stall or be completely discarded and thrown out the window.
Mark Urban is here, as he is every Monday, to talk us through the big foreign policy, diplomatic and defence stories. Hello, Mark. Welcome back.
Good morning.
Good.
How are you?
I'm very well. Good to have you with us, and happy bank holiday to you. Look, we've just heard, very recently, that the Israeli Security Cabinet has voted to capture the entire Gaza Strip as tens of thousands of reservists are called up. What does that mean, to capture the entire Gaza Strip, do you think?
Well, simply, it's a complete reoccupation. It's the reversal of what was done in two stages in 1994-5, when they handed over the administration of much of the Strip to the Palestinian Authority. And then in 2005, the Israeli army left, and about 20 settlements Jewish settlements were dismantled, and they cleared out. And the army went with them. Now, given everything that's happened since the 7th of October 2023, it would appear that they've now decided that reoccupation is the only way to ensure their security. The other aspect of this, Hugo, that's been bubbling away over the last few days is the question of aid distribution. Now, the Israelis have put a chokehold on the Gaza Strip for the last couple of months in terms of not allowing aid in, because they've tried to push through a new system for meeting humanitarian needs of the 2 million or so people in there. Now, they had originally banned what was the old system, the United Nations Refugee and Works Administration, UNRWA so-called. They put forward an alternative system, which I think yesterday or the day before, the UN declined to work with. So I think in part the Israelis will present this as, well, we've got no option. We can't get aid in now unless we go in and re-administer the whole place. But of course, like many things in the Middle East, there's a sort of rather complex series of steps that led to that situation.
And look, I mean, in as much as we understand the scale of the conflict so far, and everything we've seen coming out of Gaza, the place looks devastated, and yet Hamas are still there. How much further is this than they've gone already, if you see what I mean? How much more war does this mean? Do they effectively occupy Gaza already, or is this a major, major new step in the conflict?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, the Israeli army has done a number of big offensives in there. Parts of northern Gaza have been invaded sort of 4 times. And obviously there is very extensive destruction in the north of the Gaza Strip and down on the Egyptian border in the Rafah area. Now, they announced a few weeks ago that they were going to create 3 new security corridors, 2 of which pretty much take in the whole of that southern part, the Rafah part, and would require the absorption of 20% or so of the Gaza Strip. Now, what seems to have been announced today goes much further. But having said everything I've just said, there is still about a third of the Gaza Strip where they've never operated. This includes the so-called Al-Mawasi humanitarian zone on the coastal strip, and a couple of other big towns where they have actually never operated. So there are areas, we see the pictures of devastation, there are areas that have not been destroyed. But if they go for full reoccupation, well, it's an open question, clearly, as to what will happen to those.
Sure. Well, look, sticking in that region, Mark, at the weekend you wrote, or yesterday, in fact, you wrote your column about the Houthis in Yemen and the attacks they were launching on Israel. And as if they were reading, they successfully hit just by the airport in Tel Aviv with a ballistic missile on Sunday morning. What's happened since that attack, and what form are we expecting Israel's response to take?
Well, the Israelis, they have responded to the Houthis on a couple of previous occasions. And generally, the trigger has been when an attack has got through that's killed somebody. But in this case, nobody was killed, but the ballistic missile, flying a very long distance from Yemen, landed just outside the airport, the main international airport for Israel, the Tel Aviv International Airport. And that, I think, is a bit of a strategic shocker for the Israelis. Despite the fact they've tried to say to the public, look, no system of defense is perfect. And they fired off many, many missiles, both Israeli and American, at very substantial cost, shooting down these ballistic missiles that the Houthis have fired in since November of 2023. It is an embarrassment, notwithstanding that they've tried to, as I say, prepare the public for the fact that some will get through. Now, I think the big question with this now, and the real kind of inflection point, is what is America going to do? Because America, for the past, 6 weeks or so, has been mounting these intense daily air attacks on the Houthis in an attempt to get them to stop both attacks on international shipping and these missile attacks on Israel. And of course, they haven't done so. And that's what I was writing about yesterday for the Sunday Times, is why have the Houthis proven so able to resist this type of military pressure? And now they're going to be under extensive sanctions as well, or have been since January of this year. So they'll have considerable humanitarian pressures as well, with imports and other things being stopped. I think all eyes are now on the US, because the US, both Peter Hegseth, the defense secretary last week, and then Donald Trump, in response to this latest attack on Tel Aviv airport, have basically said, we're going to hold Iran responsible, and implied that they're going to attack Iran because of its support and its provision, for example, of those missiles that get fired at Tel Aviv, that they send them to the Houthis. So that's one thing. But at the same time, there's supposed to be a new reinvigorated process going on to try and solve the Iranian nuclear question. And it would appear that Donald Trump is quite keen to get a win there, to get some sort of deal with Iran on that. It's been faltering a bit for the last week or two, that process. But there are some fundamental questions now that will have to be answered in the White House, and speak to significant divisions between Donald Trump's advisors as to whether the answer to the Houthi thing is to put pressure on the jugular, as it were, and to attack Iran and hold them accountable. But if you do that, then presumably the whole attempt to get back into the business of restricting their nuclear program will either stall or be completely discarded and thrown out the window. So that's the decision they've got to make. And I sense, given the kind of language that's come from the White House since this latest attack, and from the Pentagon before it, that they've kind of boxed themselves in on this.
Yeah, I mean, look, before we move on from this, Mark, just how are the Houthis proving so resilient? Because I mean, Yemen is hardly a functioning state at the best of times. They're getting pummeled at the moment. How are they still capable of launching attacks like this?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, they've withstood so much. You know, there were several years when there was this Saudi-led coalition in Yemen trying to overwhelm them and bring about some kind of solution in Yemen to the Saudis' liking, obviously, which has been successfully resisted. Look, they're tough. They have a substantial base among the Shia population there. They're a political movement as well as a military one. Those people feel they're engaged in a struggle for survival against some of the other groups and some of the other neighbors that would wish to suppress them. And they've had this benefit all the way through of significant materiel support from Iran. And I mean, the Houthis, you know, they've got so many different ways, for example, of attacking shipping coming through the Red Sea. They've got missiles with a 500-kilometer range. They've got missiles with a 100-kilometer range. They've got ones that are cruise missiles, fly low and fairly slow near the surface of the sea. They've got ballistic ones that dive in on the target. They've got drones. I mean, they have literally got an arsenal which most countries in the world, certainly including most European countries, couldn't match in terms of sort of variety and numbers of weapons. So they are very well armed. They store a lot of this weaponry in caves and built up areas. It's hard, despite everything the Americans have done at cost for themselves, to reduce it. And they've never really faced a really significant ground offensive, which is what the Iranians' partners in Lebanon, Hezbollah, got really caught out by in the autumn last year when the Israelis invaded.
Thank you very much indeed, Mark Urban. You can hear him on this show on Mondays, and you can read him in the Sunday Times every week. Always an essential briefing there from Mark.